is this actually gonna work? Are we actually gonna make it there? This is uncharted territory here. I'm moving towards something I've never done before.
That 100-miler almost broke you. You pushed yourself through that.
And so I just knew that I was going to run until I can't run anymore, and then I'm gonna walk until I can't walk anymore, and then I'm gonna crawl.
A lot of people don't believe that they can do something of that magnitude.
I was so determined to find out who that Leslie was at the end of that race that I was willing to do whatever it took. You have all the tools to make you successful.
Very possible for you to go from 0 to 100 miles. Leslie, welcome to the show. It's been such a long time since I've seen you, my friend. How are you?
Mike, I'm so excited to connect with you. I feel like we have messaging each other on like social for like a year to almost 2 years now.
Yeah, probably.
And I'm just so excited to see you.
I know. It's been so good to watch your transformation and just how much we've grown ever since we did that front runner event in November of 21. That's where we first connected. And I remember that event very vividly.
Me too. Remember when we did that little thing together and it was like I was leading you?
Oh yeah, the trust thing with the blindfold. Oh my God. I was like one of the biggest freakouts of my life. I was like, get off, don't touch me. I was like just panicking the whole time. And you're like, you're okay. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm so unsafe. So Leslie, you have an amazing story. And the reason why I love this story is because I'm one of the few people that knew you before this amazing transformation, before this ultra runner superstar that we see before us, who's really kind of documenting their journey, which is just so cool to see. And you just did your first, didn't you just recently do a 100-miler recently?
I did.
We need to talk about that. Yeah, we're going to have to talk about that because I probably will never do a 100-miler. And you can't say never, but it's cool watching people do feats of endurance like that. And so I'd love to talk to you about that today. And I also want to talk about this like, I have to say, it's pretty insane just watching you go from that event and the same event that I was, and then watching like 2 years, almost to the day. We're sitting here now and you're coaching people, you're helping people learn how to run, you're thriving as a real estate agent. You and your husband are like tag teaming in real estate and just doing your thing. And the most important thing is I'm seeing this level of joy coming out of you with these aligned choices. So I am excited to dive into that. I know you are. We were talking a little bit before the show about that. So let's get into it. Leslie, what in God's name got you into ultra running out of all the things in the world?
I literally found out about it I think it was January of 2022. Literally never even heard of the sport until last year. It kind of just all kind of fell in my lap. I'd always really thought running was cool. I thought it was a really cool, convenient sport to do. In college, every now and then I'd be like, well, I need to get healthy again. And I'd go for like a little run, and it would be like a walk jog, and it would be like, for like 30 minutes or whatever. I always thought it'd be cool to do like a bucket list, like marathon in like Tokyo or something like that. And it would be like, something like that. But I never actually signed up for one or committed to it or anything. And Danny, who was at that event, at that front runner event in November, we just got to chatting, and he was a runner, and we just started talking about it. And I was like, I've always wanted to do that, and like I probably should. And he was like, why not? And it was just one of those like, you can do it in a month if you really wanted to. Like you could run a marathon. And for some reason, when it landed, I was like, oh yeah, you're right. I can do this. I should do this. I think I will. And it was like that kind of like, I guess I will. And I had gotten a couple of breakthroughs of that retreat itself with just like feeling empowered and feeling like I had the world at my fingertips. It was really just my choice on what I wanted to do with my life. Because back then I was really searching, I think, for some meaning in my life. And up until that point, I had done a lot of things that I thought I should have done because my people around me said like, that would be good, or encouraged me. But very little had I ever said like, I want to do this and I'm going to do it. And so I just decided like, okay, well, this will help me with my, mental health. It will help give me some little therapeutic exercise. It will help me with my physical health, and let's just, go for it and see. That'd be kind of fun to do. And so I just started running. I signed up for a half marathon in April of 2022. And so I kind of like self-trained, DIY'd it up until that point, asked questions, tried out all kinds of gear and all that. And then, I just got to the point where it wasn't hard anymore. And then it was super, super fun. And then I fell in love with it. And then I got addicted to it. And it just kind of became this new thing in my life that was giving me a lot of things that I was lacking in. I always talk about running like it's a relationship, because that's how it feels to me. It feels like a relationship that has very different facets to it. It's constantly changing. It's constantly evolving. And so, yeah, that's just kind of what happened. And then so I told Danny when I did my half marathon.
This is Danny Diaz, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Danny Diaz.
Danny.
Okay, the shout out to Danny Diaz if you're listening to this. Well, Leslie, and I wanted to jump in there. You had said, and just to clarify, I want for people who are listening to this, you had never ran before. You were not a runner.
No.
It's like 0 miles, like no 5. Have you done a 5K before that, or?
Yeah, I did a 5K, but it was like I think I did it. Yeah, I did one 5K.
So you've done one 5K, and now then you just did 100-miler.
Yes.
In a little over a year.
Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah, it is. Well, and then that's what I wanted to dive into with that, because I think for a lot of people, it seems very daunting when you go from 0 to 100 in almost anything. But when someone tells you, oh, you could do 100-miler, why not? And you've never ran before and you have no clue where to start. This enthusiasm that you had about just jumping into doing it and just making sure that you're just taking things, bull by the horns. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to figure it out. I'm just going to make it happen. I think that's, first of all, like that's a testament to you. But the other thing I wanted to dive into was you said you were looking for something.
I have always felt this like deep longing and maybe like a knowing that I was meant for big things. And I just always knew that about myself. I knew that I was going to be like, like a mover in life. And that I, for some reason, always felt gravitated towards athletics. Like I was always interested in like, I had horses growing up and I did rodeo and all that. And that, I really enjoyed that. So I think when I first started like kind of getting into it, it was like this thing where I was like, I want to see what I can do. Maybe that's what I was trying to find out. Like, what can I do? Like, what is this body capable of?
Yeah.
And, and how would that feel? Like, I remember I would say that a lot. I would see people doing crazy things like Ninja Warrior or, like the Olympics or something. I'd be like, how would that feel to have that physical ability to do something like that? And like, I don't know, it just was always kind of fascinating to me, like what human bodies are like capable of.
And like seeing, first of all, I love American Ninja Warrior. I think that's great. I have a buddy of mine that's like done it a couple of times and he says it's like so cool, but it's very exhausting and it's taxing. And it's just like the physical, it just takes a lot out of you. You had mentioned about pushing, and seeing what the human body was capable on. Tell me what it was like for you when you ran your first half marathon, that distance over 5K. What was the feelings that came up for you during that run?
Oh my gosh, I love this question. I love questions like this because I'd get so emotional thinking about it. Every run has been so special. It felt to me, it was like the first time I'd really ever felt like I was a little girl again, like frolicking through the woods or what. Like, I know that sounds kind of weird, but like, I remember on my playlist, I put Hannah Montana on there because I used to be obsessed with like Miley Cyrus and like Hannah Montana.
So did the rest of America.
Right? I mean, it's inevitable. But there's a song, it's called You'll Always Find Your Way Back Home. And that's what it felt like when I crossed that threshold, when I think I'd ran like something like 10 miles up until that point. And I remember at the 10-mile mark, and I was like, all right, here we go. This is uncharted territory here. I'm moving towards something I've never done before, you know. And that song came on like around that same time, and I was like, that's it. Like, I feel like I'm coming back to myself. Like, I'm coming back home to this feeling of feeling free and feeling myself and being fully Leslie, if that makes a sense.
I see where you're going with that. It's almost like you tapped into like your inner child. Like that just like came out, and it kind of, and it gets stuck with us when we, you know, for, I guess as you grow older, you kind of just get responsible for bills and tasks and family obligations that you kind of forget what it was like to play as a kid again. And I'm imagining that's what running was for you.
It was, and it takes bravery to do something in public like running, which is super, super hard, and it makes you look not good, you know, and as a woman, you're constantly worried about what you look like. And so it takes, you know, you got to not care what people think when you're running, you know, down the street or whatever. And that was a big deal for me. You know, like I was nervous to suffer in front of people, and I didn't really I don't like to feel that way. But I did it anyways. And that was a very freeing feeling for me.
Yeah. Why were you nervous about that though at first? Was it the judgment? Like what was coming up for you in that?
When I was a kid, I used to get embarrassed at like little thing. Like if there was anything that like, if I ever got kind of excluded or looked at differently, I would get like really intense and like anxious embarrassment feelings, and I would cry. And so sometimes you know, growing up, I had faced a lot of rejection, like with other sports, like with horses and stuff. Being at a rodeo team, I had, you know, people that I rode horses with, like, kind of reject me as a person and like not really want to be friends with me. And so that always kind of like affected the way I kind of like did things publicly, athletically. And so I think that's probably where that came from, was this fear of, you know, suffering in front of people and, you know, struggling in front of people.
When you found that running was your thing, you know, whatever, what was that moment like?
Okay, so now hindsight, I feel like I'm like, that's when it happened. Like I can point to it. So after the half marathon, I got asked to do this other retreat with Danny Diaz and another coach called, his name is Dan Holguin. We ran through Glacier National Park.
Oh, cool.
With like 10 other people, and it was 22 miles, and we trained and all this kind of stuff. And I was like in the front of the pack, loving it, dancing, doing my like full on Leslie again. Mm-hmm. And I just remember just being like so content and just feeling like, oh, I could do this shit all day long. Every day I could do this shit.
Yeah.
Like, this feels so, it just feels like flow. It feels so natural. It feels like, you know, I'm me. This is what I feel like I'm kind of meant to do.
Yeah. When you did Glacier, now we're at 22 miles. You had done like your 12 miles, and then now you've done your 22 miles, and you ran through one of the most beautiful national parks in the country. Was there a moment where you felt like you couldn't continue on? And if so, how did you push yourself through that?
Yeah. So towards the end, we were, you know, coming down the mountain, and we had been running for like 8+ hours that day. And because we were with a big old group. So we were coming down, and the quads were failing, and it was like intense pain that I had really never felt before, I don't think. Definitely not. I was with a buddy, my friend Christine, and we were just kind of talking the whole time. And we were both kind of in this place where I remember I'd be like, are you hurting? And she'd be like, yeah, I'm hurting. Are you hurting? And I'd be like, yeah, I'm hurting. And sometimes I felt like, is this actually going to work? Like, are we actually going to make it there? But very little, because I feel like it was just one of those things where it was like, well, we got to get out of the park. I didn't have that feeling until my 100-miler, probably, which is why I kept on going, because I feel like I didn't ever meet that point.
Yeah. And it sounds like to me, for a lot of people, that they don't believe that they can do something of that magnitude. And, you're a living testament of you can really do anything that you want to do if you put your mind to it. And where do you find that most people hold themselves back when it comes to things like this, when it comes to maybe endurance running? Because I know you coach people on running and you get them to go from 0 to 1, maybe even more. But where do you find maybe your clients or people hold themselves back when it comes to running?
I think the biggest misconception is this, and I had it too. Well, maybe not misconception, but a fear. It's the fear of injuring your body to the point of no return. I would have pains that would come up when I first started training that I would be like, is this normal? Is something wrong? And then my coaches would say, nope, it's completely normal. Keep going. And I've had a lot of clients that have had pains in maybe their knees or their hips or other areas in their body. And the fear of making worse damage, causing worse damage holds them back because they don't know what their body's capable of. And they're afraid to find out because they're risking never being able to run again in their minds. That's what they're risking, right? So I think that is what holds a lot of runners back, is the fear of injuring themselves more.
When it came to your 100-mile race, that was big for you. As somebody who had progressively had gotten from the 5K to the half marathon to the full marathon, and now here you are, you're running roughly, I would say, 4 marathons in one day. I commend you for it. Again, like, I don't know if I would ever do a 100-miler, but what I will say is that watching people do something of that magnitude is so inspiring. And just knowing you personally from the last couple of years and watching you go from somebody who wasn't a runner, who was looking for something, to now finding that thing in running and helping people find that thing in running, that 100-miler almost broke you. It almost like physically and mentally broke you. But you pushed yourself through that. What was your game plan going into that? How did you continue on? And what was there anything profound that came up during your running about either yourself or your life that you'd like to share with us?
Oh my gosh, so many things I could say. So my game plan in it was, I'm here to learn, right? Like I know I had I ran a 52 miler in January of this year. And so after that one, I was like, all right, let's go for the 100. And so I had a coach, and my coach, Dan, who has run hundreds before,
Not
the
Danny
whole time.
Diaz, another Dan.
Yeah, another Dan.
Another Dan, okay.
Yeah, so our game plan to go in was, he told me, you have all the tools to make you successful. You've done the work. We've practiced up to this point, But I was going in with, like knowing that up until the 52-mile mark, that was all just going to be like training. After that, it was going to be uncharted territory. We have no clue what my body's going to do after that. We have no clue what's going to happen. And so I just knew that I was going to run until I can't run anymore. And then I'm going to walk until I can't walk anymore. And then I'm going to crawl until I can't crawl anymore. And then if my body gives out, then that's the end of it. That for me was what I had signed up for, and I know not everybody would, have that as their intention, but that to me I was so determined to find out who that Leslie was at the end of that race that I was willing to do whatever it took. Getting into that race, I hit that 52-mile mark, I think around, I want to say 2 or 3 a.m. or something like that. And so then knowing that I had, twice as, or that same amount going, it kind of did seem like a bigger task. And so I would say, all right, let's just go from this aid station to the next aid station. That's 7 miles. I can do 7 miles. Let's go 7 more miles. And then, I would just keep on taking it in those bite-sized pieces. There was a point that I got to, my husband, Jeremy, was actually my pacer. He was with me. It was he was with me from like 9 to 3 p.m. that next day. The sleep deprivation, I didn't know this. One of the side effects is paranoia. And so there were some runners that were passing me And I was so paranoid that I was going to mess their race up. So I would try to get to the side. I would try to get off the trail, but I was in pain. And so every time I got off the trail, it really hurt. Like my feet would hurt, I'd have to like slowly get over there. And I was moving. I was what we call putt-putting, which is like, like you just are kind of like shuffling your feet. After I started doing that for a while, I was like, oh my God, I'm spending so much energy caring about these people and ruining their race while I'm out here racing my own race. And that was one thing. I think my biggest takeaway was that I am so worried about other people and their reactions around me and messing them up that I'm willing to slow down my race and my process in order to make them feel better. And that was a big thing that came up that I already had been working through like my whole life. I feel like I've been working through that, but it was very apparent in that moment. I really got down on myself for this pain because I was thinking, am I gonna, like, is this possible? I remember I asked Jeremy at one point, like, is this possible? Like, am I actually gonna make it? And then, he said, like, yeah, of course you can. But in his brain, he was saying, at this speed, we're not going to.
Oh, he did it with you.
Yeah. So I had 3 pacers. So I had.
And what's a pacer? Yeah, talk to me about what a pacer is.
A pacer is just another runner that you're allowed to have on the race with you to just kind of keep you going. And it's usually around certain mile marks. They'll say you're allowed to have a pacer. So this one was like around mile 50. You could have someone come in and help you. So I had 3 people that I had come. One was Christine, the girl who I did the one through Glacier with. Mm-hmm. She helped me throughout the night. And then Jeremy joined me, my husband. And then I had my friend Alan, who had run a 100-miler before. He took me home. He went from like mile 80 to the end with me. So they were there just kind of like helping me like keep the pace and like encouraging me, but also just like keeping me moving. That was like really the biggest part, was just to keep me moving. Because you don't realize how much your brain just wants to rest, and you'll be like, oh, what's that? And then you just kind of stop, like, you're just not really in your right mind at certain points when you're so deprived of sleep like that and you've lost so much energy. You just kind of, your brain starts to go kind of like weird.
Something I pulled out of that story as I'm kind of taking notes, just listening to what you're saying, is, it's almost a testament to people when we feel like we don't have enough, how much we rely on our community and our closest friendships to get us through those tough times. And, your friend Christine has been a constant. She was there with you at Glacier. She was there with you at the 100-miler. Jeremy, your husband, was there with you. And your coach, both Dan's, Danny and Dan, were there for you. Talk to me about the importance of community for you in running and how it's helped you really just grow and become the person that you are today.
It has done so much for me personally. Like, I know it has done a lot for other people, but I truly believe it's one of the most welcoming communities that there is in sports. Having someone who either has done something before, who is like excited for you to try or start, that is like a huge help for anybody. Like, having Danny tell me like, you can, like, come on, you can do that or whatever. And like that kind of support, but then also like having people even just at a race, like that's what I also love about the ultra running community. Like everyone is so willing to help out and like hand over you a snack if you need a snack. If you need more water, you got a water here. We got ice. You need more. Like everyone is just so, just like it's like a a whole community. And 100-miler, I truly did have like a village to get me there. There were runners on the course who were telling my parents at the end, like, she's coming. She's like, we just saw her. She's on her way. She's moving. She looks good. Like she's, and then I would have I would have like my husband who helped me just like realistically like understand what was possible in that moment. Like I needed someone to talk to me about reality because I was in such a, in my brain, I was not really, there's so much going on inside of me that it was hard for me to like have an axis to to stick to. And so, geez, my coach, like having a coach take you through something that they've already done and talk with you, like, and keep in touch with you and text you certain things at the exact moment that you need it, and like, and teach you how to be grateful for the legs that you have in those moments. Like, there's no words behind that kind of support that you get from those kind of people. Like, it takes a whole team for someone to accomplish 100-miler. Like, are you kidding? Like, there's so many people involved. Like, you know, there's volunteers at the races and all that. And everyone is so overly positive, and they don't have to be, you know, like, it rained. It was like 40 degrees and it was nasty weather. And my mother-in-law, she drove her like brand new SUV and got it so muddy inside and everything. And she was so excited the whole time, like, just like the best attitudes ever. And that means so much to someone who is like feeling like, oh my God, I'm so slow. Oh my God, like, I'm trying so hard. And I really just want everyone to have a good time. And like, you know, you have all those kind of things going on in your head, but you're also in your own head going like,
Yeah.
I'm just going to do this. You know, I got to work in my brain to get going, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's a village, man. Like, it's a whole ass team.
That's beautiful. I love how you describe that too, because for many of us, like, we want that community in our lives, and we want those relationships because they mean so much to us. And I think, again, like, this story is so powerful. I think for me, just listening to it, and also just for people out there who are probably encountering something that seems daunting. It seems like their 100-mile race, then they don't know where to start. And you've shown that you can go from 0 to 100 miles in a couple years. And as we're kind of getting into the last segment of this show, now that you're done with your 100 miles, the feelings of accomplishment I'm sure you felt, and everything that just came over you was probably just pretty amazing. But you decided that you wanted to teach other people this exact same thing. So tell me about your work. Tell me about what inspired you to coach other people. How has that journey been for you?
I personally was transformed by my coaches. I've had multiple coaches in my life get me to where I'm at right now. I'm such a believer in having a coach in everything. So I'd always thought coaching would be fun, and because I'd had some, you know, really help me. And then I saw Dan, my running coach, and he's just a very different person. He has dreadlocks down to his knees. He lives in Montana. He was an American Ninja Warrior. He did rodeo. Like, he's just all over the map with like cool and different and unique. But the way that he would say things to me, like, he would just kind of cut through everything, and he would say, like, he got me to start working out in the gym, and I would be like, yeah, I feel awkward. And he said, it's okay. You're supposed to feel awkward. That just, the way that delivery for me, and also providing the space for me to be scared and telling me it's okay to feel scared to do something like this. And we all feel this way before, right? You know, and like making you feel like you belong. So I had a lot of people reach out to me and just say, like, I'm so inspired by what you're doing, and I have questions. You know, every now and then somebody would just ask me like, hey, what shoes do you wear? You know, like, you know, and they would start asking me these questions, and I am constantly like learning new things with running. And so I thought, like, what better way to help other people and inspire other people by just showing them what I did and giving them the tools that I have had over the years to do the same thing. I love when someone comes to me and says, I want what you have. Something about the way that you smile and the way that you look, you know, I see your videos or whatever, like, you have some sort of like glow and life about you, that I want that. And that's where I'm like, okay, you know, like, I can ask them a few questions, and if they're willing, I can take them there. You know, it's one thing I've also learned with coaching is you have to trust your coach. And that takes you have to build that trust over time and have that relationship with your client. Because they're getting out of their comfort zone every day. Every single day they're getting out of their comfort zone by doing the things that you're putting in front of them. I've seen some people blossom into running consistently, that literally had never run before and thought it was crazy that was even possible for them. And they thought that their, you know, they were too far gone, or they were too old, or their story was over. My sister, she has 5 kids. She has 5 kids, and one has a disability, and she told me she wanted to try learning how to run, and she didn't know what was going to happen.
Wow.
And she runs every day, and she's been doing it for however long I've been coaching, and like I'm helping her do it every single day. And she is like, she ran 90 minutes the other day, and like, how can you, like, when you're running an hour and a half, and 6 months ago you were never doing that, like, that's got to change you in your brain. Like, your mindset has to be completely transformed by doing something like that. And for me to just have the tools to give someone and provide that space for them to be open and vulnerable and raise their hand and be willing, it's the least I can do. I'm just here learning myself. You know, I feel like I'm learning every single day how to get out of my comfort zone and be a better person. But
that's so good, Leslie. That's so awesome to see you in a new season of life. And for all of you out there who are listening to Leslie's story, it is very possible for you to go from 0 to 100 miles. And Leslie's a living testament of that, and just putting your mindset there. So Leslie, thank you so much for being on the show, for sharing your story. It's so good to see you just really thrive and just be a completely transformed version of yourself, and just seeing what's next for you. Speaking of which, what is next for you? Is there a 200-mile race? Is there another 100-miler? Are you?
Yeah, there's other ones out in the future. I've been going so hard, so fast. I have decided to kind of like actually exercise some more patience. Now that I know I can, I'm like, okay, let's take our time here. So next year, my challenge that I'm going to do, which I haven't really announced this yet, but I'm going to do a 50-miler every month.
Wow. That's amazing. I was about to say that's freaking crazy. What are you doing? You know, I was about to.
That's my goal. If I can, I think it'll be so fun. It's like a project for me to see like how much I can keep up with this. But when I was training for my 100, it was actually my coach's idea, because I was doing so well. I told him, I was like, I'm like suspiciously excited about how my body's responding with all these miles you're putting in front of me. And he was like, well, maybe your body just operates really, really well doing like a 50-miler a month. Maybe you ought to try that. And I was like,
What a nice way to push the envelope, right? Like, oh yeah, just no big deal. So good. So Leslie, as we're coming to a close here, again, thank you so much for your time, and just for your charisma and your energy, and just for sharing your story. I think it's going to really help a lot of people and everybody out there who's looking for a little bit of juice and a little bit of inspiration. And as I shared with you before we started the show, that we ask every single guest on this show what it means for them to live your truth. So Leslie, what does it mean for you to live your truth?
I just think about, in my journey, for me to, what I see when Leslie lives her truth, she, number one, she communicates it to herself and to others. This is what I'm going to do. You have to say it, and you have to declare it, and you have to really believe that that's it. And then when you really believe that it's your truth, living it out, that means you do it whenever you do it. When it's hard, you don't do it when it's easy. You continue to do it when the environment and the situation is not so favorable. That to me is when you're actually living your truth.
Leslie, my friend, thank you for joining the show. And thanks to all of you for tuning into this week of Live Your Truth Now. If you like what you heard, go ahead and hit subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch this episode and many more on our YouTube channel. Go ahead and click the subscribe button there. This is Mike Liguori. I'll see you guys next week.